It is the 21st of June 1990, and an operator is called out to an irradiation facility at Soreq in Israel. He notices a problem. The transport mechanism of the irradiator has gotten jammed. Faced with the workload pressures and confronted with two conflicting indications on his control panel, the operator decides to try and clear the jam himself. The safety systems on site should prevent him from entering the irradiation room, but a known exploit of turning the system on and off multiple times releases the lock to the room. He enters to inspect the blockage. He leaves to retrieve a cart and then enters again. Within minutes, feeling his eyes start to burn, he flees the room, but it was too late. He had received a full-body deadly radiation dose. Despite intensive medical care, he would die 36 days later. Today we're looking at the radiological accident in Soreq. As such, I'm going to rate this subject here 3 on my disaster scale, but also 3 on my legacy scale. Although fairly unknown, the event shows the importance of safety procedures and the risks you are exposed to if ignored. Soreq has been the centre for Israeli nuclear research ever since the 1950s and the construction of the country's first research reactor. An irradiation facility in Soreq was built in the late 1960s. The project was a joint venture between the Netherlands and the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission. Although within the Soreq site, the facility is operated under a separate company by the name of Soreq Radiation Limited. The irradiation facility employed a model JS6500 gamma sterilizer, designed, manufactured and installed by Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. The unit uses cobalt-60 as its radioactive material. The facility is used to irradiate and thus sterilise pre-packaged medical products amongst other items. Irradiation of an item can take many hours as it is passed through the machine in steps. Packages to be irradiated are packed in cartons, and 2 or 3 of these cartons are stacked and taped together for passage through the irradiator. The boxes move through the machine via a roller system similar to the ones used on other types of production lines, except in this case, the items move past the radioactive source multiple times in a Z-like shape to receive the required dose over 2 levels. To achieve movement of the carton boxes, pistons are employed at each change in direction. The amount of time the item stays in each position is controlled by a timer, and when a preset time has passed, the piston is activated. Like with all radioactive materials, its safe movement and control are vital to the overall site safety, and Soreq was no different, as personnel may need to enter the irradiation room, and being confronted with a whole load of cobalt-60 would ruin most people's day. The cobalt-60 was mounted on a source rack, consisting of 6 modules containing multiple pencils of the radioisotope, made up of 2 source elements within. To even out the dosage, dummy pencils were also installed in each module, totaling 42 pencils per module. When not in use, the rack is stored in a water tank, and this shields staff from gamma radiation. To raise the source rack to its irradiation position, cables and hoists are used, powered by a pneumatic piston. As a failsafe, if the piston runs out of air, then via the power of gravity, the rack is plunged back into its water pool. The state of the rack is indicated to operators on the control panel via a simple micro switch, but this needs regular adjustment to give the correct information. During the 1970s and 1980s, similar systems had experienced blockages and jams. As such, the manufacturer issued a notice to install a metal shroud. However, at Soreq, this was not done. So how was the system made safe from any unwitting intruder to the irradiation room? As you don't want something like the Hanoi radiation incident to happen again. The operators control the system via a control panel outside the irradiation room. There are 3 key switches for power on, source raise and machine on. The first 2 control the movement of the source, and the third allows movement of the transport mechanism while the source is raised. The irradiation program is interrupted and the source automatically lowered if any of the following occur: being tripped by a safety interlock, or if sensors detect high temperatures in the irradiation room, low pressure in the pneumatic hoist system, or misaligned cartons jamming the transport mechanism. If a product jam stops the source rack from returning to its pond, then an alarm should sound to the operator. To enter the irradiation room, a key switch that operates the door lock solenoid is linked up to a radiation monitor. Needless to say, if radiation levels are registered above background, then the door cannot be unlocked. To gain access to the room, the operator first has to press the monitor test button. The radiation detector checks the reading in the room. If OK, the button can be released. Then this is checked again to make sure the room is at background levels. After this, the lock will be released. All of this is also interlocked with the source rack position sensor. If not in the pool, then the door also cannot be released. I should say, also, if the radiation alarm is going off, then the test cannot be attempted as the lock to the door is completely de-energized. Once entrance to the room is granted, the operator must make their way through an area called the maze, finally entering the irradiation room. There is an emergency cut-off pull string attached to the wall of the room, which if pulled will drop the source rack back into the pool. Of a total workforce of 20 at Soreq, there were 4 operating staff, a senior technician who had worked at the plant since it was built in the late 1960s, and 3 technicians. Each had been certified and had at least 1 year's practical experience, which was a requirement to operate the facility. Due to the equipment being from Canada, much of the operating manuals were in English. Only a short list of routine operating and safety instructions, including the procedure for entering the irradiator, had been issued in Hebrew. This led to some confusion, as not all the operators were very proficient in English. The irradiator was often in operation 24 hours a day due to the high workload, but it was only staffed on a regular day shift. The conveyor was long enough to hold 5 to 7 hours worth of cartons. Before leaving at the end of the day shift, the staff loaded the input conveyor to its full capacity and completely unloaded the output conveyor. At around midnight, an operator would go to the facility to reload and unload the conveyor for the night. Due to the facility being unattended, the source rack down indicator is hardwired to the emergency control center of the Soreq Research Nuclear Test Center and is staffed 24 hours a day. In the event of a malfunction, the on-call operator would be requested to attend and rectify any faults. This leads us onto the summer solstice of 1990 and a jam occurring at the irradiation facility just after 5 p.m. At around 5 p.m. on the 21st of June 1990, a jam occurred in the transport mechanism in the irradiator room. This caused cartons on other parts of the conveyor to burst open. One carton was pushed towards the source rack. The overdose timer detected the jam and the control system automatically initiated the source rack to be lowered. Displaced cartons on the lower conveyor stopped the rack from lowering back into the pool. The micro switch on the source hoist malfunctioned and incorrectly indicated that the source rack was fully down. The product jam was registered at the emergency centre at the Soreq Nuclear Research Centre, and the Soreq duty operator was informed at home by telephone. An unqualified staff member silenced the alarm by disconnecting it from the control panel. By 5:35 p.m, the on-call operator had attended and reconnected the alarm. On the console, the product jam and source downlight were illuminated. Confusingly, the radiation alarm was sounding, indicating a high level of radiation. These were all conflicting indications for the operator. For situations like this, 2 operators are required to be in attendance, but strangely, he decided to deal with the issue alone, and this is most likely due to production pressures. Faced with conflicting information, the operator decided to ignore the radiation alarm and believed the source rack was safely in the pool. Little did he know, but the vital micro switch used to prove the source rack location had not been adjusted correctly and was thus defective. To silence the alarm, the operator went behind the console and disconnected the cable from the radiation monitor to the alarm and control circuitry. This should have meant that the door to the irradiation room could not be opened, as the radiation monitor test would automatically fail. But there's a little knack to bypass this. The key from the machine switch can be removed and inserted into the power switch, which, if cycled on and off several times while pushing the test button, tricks the monitor into thinking that it is reading background radiation. After bypassing the interlock, the operator entered the maze. He took with him a small radiation monitor, but did not calibrate it. As he entered the room, he should have been greeted with the blue glow from the Soreq in the pool, caused by a Cherenkov radiation. Not noticing that, he still continued inside. The operator left the room to fetch a cart. After re-entering the room, he began to remove the damaged cartons from the conveyor. Quickly, he began to feel a thumping in his head and a burning sensation in his eyes. He fled the room and contacted at 5:45 p.m. his superior, the senior technician, and explained what happened. Not long later, he felt sick and, with his head still throbbing, started to retch. The senior technician telephoned the emergency centre at Soreq Nuclear Research Centre. An RSO from the research centre came to assist, and after being explained on how to gain access to the room, went into the maze with a dosimeter. His reading was at 0.5 sieverts an hour. The 32-year-old operator was transported to the Ichilov Medical Center in Tel Aviv, where he was examined by a physician 2 hours and 15 minutes after exposure. At this point, it was thought that his exposure was 10 to 20 Gray over a period of around 2 minutes. As a note, 4 Gray has killed people before. For the first few days, he vomited regularly each day and continued to feel nausea. By day 4, he was given a bone marrow transplant. The white blood cell count continued to drop rapidly on day 5, and by day 22, the symptoms continued with a fever of 40 degrees centigrade. Liver function continued to deteriorate in testing and the sickness increased. By day 34, he was confused and bedridden. At 2 a.m. on the 27th of July 1990, day 36, the patient died. It was found during the autopsy that death was linked to his radiation exposure and GVHD, graft versus host disease. This happens when, after a bone marrow transfer, the white blood cells from the donor start attacking the recipient, which ultimately can cause organ failure. After the accident, the Soreq was returned to its safe position later that evening on the 21st of June after taking advice from the supplier's headquarters in Canada. Investigators set out to find out why the operator acted as he did. As noted in the IAEA report, that a properly translated manual for the operators could have helped with fault finding, as well as stricter training, by properly configuring any portable radiation monitors before entry to an irradiation area. Moreover, if the operator had followed the rules and requested another member of staff to assist, then the dangerous path he went down likely wouldn't have happened. It was also found that entrance security to the irradiation room was easily bypassed by playing with the console, by repeatedly cycling the key in the power switch. Also, the micro switch needed proper adjustment, was found to be faulty, leading to the incorrect indications on the operator's panel. But essentially, preventing the jam from the start would have averted the radiation incident. If the company had heeded warnings in the 1970s and 80s and installed the recommended shroud, then the jam at the Soreq might not have happened at all. Needless to say, these were key recommendations given from the IAEA to the facilities management. It is a shame that pressure to get production running again led the operator to undertake actions that turned out to be pretty deadly. But as they say, rule books are written in blood.